My name is Naomi Bishop, and the day my mother called me for the first time in 11 months, I already knew, before she said a single word, exactly how much money she was about to ask for. I knew because I'm a forensic accountant. I spend my life reading the small signs people don't think anyone notices, the pause before a lie, the too casual tone right before a favor, the way someone says, "I just wanted to check in," when what they mean is, "I need something." My mother's voice on the phone that morning had all three. What she didn't know was that 4 days earlier, a file had landed on my desk at work with my own family's name printed across the top of it. And by the time she finished asking me for $60,000 to save the family business, I already understood something she hadn't figured out yet. I wasn't the only one in that family keeping a secret. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the one nobody worried about, which in my family meant the one nobody paid attention to. My older brother Cole was the golden child who ran the family's construction supply company after my father retired. My younger sister Ivy was the baby everyone still called the baby at 29. I was the middle daughter who left for college on a partial scholarship and never really came back, not because I didn't love them, but because loving them from a distance hurt less than loving them up close. For years, the pattern was the same. A holiday card here, a birthday text there. Long stretches of silence that nobody in my family ever seemed to notice, because they were busy with each other, with Cole's business, with Ivy's on-again, off-again relationships, with the small dramas that filled up a family I'd quietly stopped being the center of. I built a career instead. I got my CPA license, then my forensic accounting certification, then a position at a respected firm in Denver that specialized in something my family never asked me a single question about: uncovering where money actually went when people said it went somewhere else. Then, 4 days before my mother's phone call, my manager handed me a new case file and said the words that made my stomach drop before I'd even open the folder. "This one's local. Might be sensitive for you. It's a company called Bishop Supply." My father's company, the one Cole now ran. A regional bank had flagged inconsistencies in their loan application and wanted an independent forensic review before approving a new line of credit. I told my manager the truth immediately, that Bishop Supply belonged to my own family, and offered to recuse myself. He looked at me for a long moment and said the firm trusted my judgment more than they worried about the connection, and that if I felt I could stay objective, they wanted me on it precisely because I already understood the business's history better than anyone else on the team. I said yes. I told myself it was simply professional. Underneath that, though, was something quieter I didn't say out loud. For the first time in years, I was about to see my family clearly, whether they wanted me to or not. The first thing I found, buried in 18 months of transaction records, was a set of transfers from the company account to a personal account that didn't belong to Cole or my father. It belonged to Ivy. $41,000 over 14 months, labeled in the company books as marketing consulting, for a sister who had no marketing background and, according to her own social media, had spent most of that period unemployed. I sat with that discovery for 2 full days before my mother called asking for $60,000, and when she finally did, framing it as an emergency to save the family business from a supposed cash flow problem caused by slow clients, I understood immediately that she either didn't know where the real money had gone, or she knew exactly and was calling me anyway, hoping the daughter she rarely spoke to would simply write a check without asking questions. I asked one question. Just one. What exactly is the $60,000 for, specifically? There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause I'd spent my career learning to read, and then she said Cole needed it to cover payroll and a supplier payment, and that the bank was being difficult about approving new credit. I told her I needed a day to think about it, which was true, though not for the reason she assumed. I needed a day because the review I was building at work would determine, with hard evidence, whether that story was even close to accurate. It wasn't. The deeper I dug, the more the picture sharpened into something no one in my family had told me. Cole had been quietly siphoning funds toward a separate venture of his own for over a year, an online retail business he'd started without telling our father, using Bishop Supply's credit and cash flow as an unofficial safety net whenever his side project ran short. The company wasn't struggling because of slow clients. It was struggling because 2 of my 3 family members had been treating it like a personal source of income, while the third, my father, who still technically owned it, had no idea either was happening. I called my mother back the next evening, and instead of discussing the $60,000, I asked her to get my father and Cole on the phone as well, telling her only that I had information about the business she'd want everyone to hear together. She sounded confused, then defensive, asking why I couldn't just help without making it complicated. I told her, calmly, that I wasn't trying to make anything complicated. I was trying to make sure nobody was about to make a very expensive mistake based on information that wasn't true. When the four of us were finally on the call, I laid it out exactly the way I would for any client. No accusations, only documentation. I described the transfers to Ivy's account, the mislabeled entries, Cole's separate venture, and the actual cash flow gap the bank had originally flagged, which had nothing to do with slow-paying clients and everything to do with money that had quietly left the company for reasons no one had disclosed to our father. I heard Ivy start to speak, then stop. I heard my father go completely silent in a way that told me he was doing the math in real time, connecting 18 months of small suspicions he'd apparently talked himself out of. Cole was the one who finally broke the silence, his voice sharp, asking how I even had access to that information, as though the real problem was that I'd found it rather than that it existed. I told him the truth. The bank had brought in an independent reviewer before extending new credit, and that reviewer happened to be me, and that nothing in the report was speculation. Every figure was pulled directly from the company's own books. I could hear, underneath his anger, the particular kind of fear that comes from being caught rather than being wronged, and for the first time in the conversation, he didn't have a counter-argument ready. My father asked me, quietly, what I thought they should do. It was the first time in years he'd asked me what I thought about anything. I told him the honest answer, that the $60,000 my mother had asked me for wouldn't fix the actual problem, and that the real fix required Cole to formally account for the funds he'd taken, Ivy to either return her payments or convert them into a documented role with real responsibilities, and the company's books to be corrected before the bank would approve any legitimate credit at all. I wasn't asking for punishment. I was asking for the truth to finally match the numbers. It took nearly 4 months for everything to settle. Cole restructured his side venture separately from the company and began repaying what he'd taken, in writing, with actual terms. Ivy took an entry-level role in the business, the first steady job she'd held in years, and slowly turned the marketing consulting label into something real. My father, for his part, called me every few weeks after that not to ask for money, but simply to ask how I was doing, conversations that felt strange at first, and then, gradually, like something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The $60,000 never changed hands, and I've never once regretted saying no to it. What I gained instead was something my family had never given me a chance to have before, a place in their lives that had nothing to do with what I could give them, and everything to do with who I actually was. My mother still calls sometimes, and these days, when the phone rings, I no longer brace myself for what she's about to ask for. I just answer,